So tell our audience a little bit about that philosophy of fostering community through coffee.
Yeah. So in that same vein, John and I were looking at, the next stage of our lives when we're starting the company. And it came down to this idea of we want to cultivate something here. We see the potential. We're not claiming to be the potential. We're not claiming to be the saviors or the solutions. Like, that's not what we're setting out to be. But could we be a catalyst? Could we cultivate that? Could we bring in source A and they connect with source B, and that becomes the next thing that changes Owasso? And so what we found, especially in the music community, and this is really where community, I think, was birthed in us, is we would travel around the country, go to these venues, and build these relationships with kids. They'd be singing like the lyrics to our songs, and there was such a like camaraderie and connection there that we'd come back 4 or 5 years later, be some of the same kids, new kids, and there was such a connection. There was something that was built there. Where they were like, hey, the lyrics to your song like stopped me from committing suicide, and you're like, wow, I just wrote that in a dark place in my life in my bedroom. I didn't realize it would help anyone else. And so that sense of community, we came back to Owasso. We started going down some different career paths. John was I was actually in insurance at the time. I was working in marketing. And we longed for building that community here. We're like, there's a missing element that we're not part of. So either it's not here or we're not tapped into it. And I think that's something key to keep in mind is you may look around and say, that's not here. And I think we have to ask the question, is it because I haven't found it yet? Or is it because like it hasn't been built yet?
Yeah.
And to tap into what's already here, if it is there. So the fostering community, came out of this word cultivate. We want to cultivate something here. We want to create a place where people can come together. And I mean, community, you mentioned Starbucks tapped into the third space theory of, that's where first space is where you live, second space is where you work, and third space is where you have community. Mm-hmm. And you go into a Starbucks and, they've got a community board there. And that's kind of like their sense of community, right? Like they're on sides of highways and, off of exits. Some of them are in downtowns. But the intentionality of like, what else can we get involved in here? And so our approach with Cultivate, that was kind of the name we wanted to settle on, was Cultivate or Cultiva. And we found out that name was already taken. So we just pulled out a thesaurus and was like, what are some other words?
I've been there in sermon prep before.
Yes.
Got to have
what
the
are some
alliteration.
other words we can use? And so foster came, and that really resonated. Okay, yeah, we want to foster that. So community is in our vision statement because, like you said, it's not just about the coffee. And we've seen really great aesthetically pleasing coffee shops. I mean, we saw some of the best in the world in the biggest cities in our country. And so there's the quality there, but then there's also, we've been to coffee shops that are like, the coolest place to be, but their coffee sucks.
Yeah.
It's like, so we wanted to find the best of both worlds and kind of merge that together. Like, how can we have really great coffee and pursue that quality within the craft and really understand, the process of roasting it and preparing it and displaying it, but then also adding the hospitality component to it. And, I'm sure if you've listened to my wife's podcast, this comes out in her, and it's part of just our family ethos is hospitality. Like, how do we make people feel comfortable? How do we serve a great cup of coffee and make people feel welcome in our shop?
Right.
And it's like, I'm sure you've heard this in the marketing world. It's the Disney World model, right? Like, you're coming into our environment. It's like you go to Star Wars land and you're there and you're seeing like the Millennium Falcon and the Stormtroopers, and you're having this really great experience, and then you see a Burger King wrapper, you're like immediately snapped out of Star Wars world, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing in story structure. Tolkien talks about this when he writes. He wrote an article about fairy stories, and it's not about fairies with wings, it's about fairy tales and fairy stories. And he talks about, I try to take the green color from grass so that you can actually look at it again. And there's this process of telling stories, helping people see something that was there all along that maybe they didn't notice because they walked by it every single day. And so with hospitality is how do we help convey that story, make people feel welcome, make people feel part of that story. And that was our approach with Foster. That's where the vision came from. So, and that keeps us on track. It's the thing that keeps us up at night. Like, are we doing that? And it's the thing that gets us out of the bed in the morning. Like, let's go do that.